Yeah, it's okay. I'm here. I can just stay over there and come back. Just stay time. Okay.
So we're going to start with Professor Ahmed from the Centre for Genocide Studies at the University of Dhaka. And I have to give these strict instructions that they're allowed a maximum of 8 minutes to speak. And if they go to 10 minutes, I will ignore the additional 2 minutes, but it's really an 8 minutes with a warning.
Well, thank you very much. Well, for a South Asian to speak in 8 to 10 minutes, that's an impossibility. And particularly if you're a Bengali, since we are oral people, we are not textual people. We have always been oral and we still remain oral. Anyway, very quickly, thanks for this opportunity for me to share some of my thoughts as we are working on this issue of Rohingyas. Well, I've been tied up with this issue for years, but let me just update you. Our High Commissioner has done a little bit of that and has probably put the context as to where we are. Very quickly, I will focus on 3 issues. The first thing that we have to keep in mind is we literally have a population bigger than Bhutan inside Bangladesh in 3 months. Bhutan became Bhutan in 60,000 years. But this population, which is 1.1 million, Bhutan has a population of 800,000, and they have a king. We don't even have a king. This 1.1 million is literally looked after by RRRC official who is younger than me. So you can well imagine the context, no infrastructure, nothing of that in 3 months' time. That's the magnitude that we are dealing with. So on the issue of response, the first thing we have to keep in mind that in the 70s and the 90s they came, but this time it's different. This time is different because in the 70s and 90s we did not have enough evidence that they committed whatever name you want to use, 3 legal concepts, whether it's crime against humanity or war crime or genocide. We didn't have in the 70s and the 90s, though there are scholars who probably would go far and say that Myanmar military has been committing genocide for years. But in the 70s and the 90s, repatriation took place. I was a little bit involved in the 90s, and I remember telling the UNHCR head at that particular time that, well, they are going back, but what about the issue of citizenship? And the answer was, Prof, don't worry about that. Since Myanmar is taking them back, that means today or tomorrow they will get the citizenship. And I was quite surprised with the statement, and you can easily see the UNHCR has failed. It has also failed because if you have, if you've heard Chris's presentation, the dates are very important. It started with the 25th, but let's start with 23rd August. 23rd August, Kofi Annan Commission report was handed over. 24th August, it was published. Then 25th, you have the Arsa attack, and 26th, you have what is regarded as the crime against humanity. So you can see that they were pretty prepared, and the very shifting of the 2 regiments from the Kachin to Arakan region also tells you. And this is where I think we have failed. Well, Bangladesh also has failed. We should have raised the flag because that regiment has been involved in genocide in other areas also. Myanmar has not committed genocide only against Rohingyas. They have committed genocide with other minorities as well. But they got away and still getting away for different reasons. In the context of response, why Bangladesh has succeeded in managing, I would say, 1.1 million in a reasonable, I would say, at least I was thoroughly impressed. I remember going back in the second month around September, and it was really depressing. But when I went back in January 2018, and even last month, I must say that, knowing some of the refugee conditions around the world, I was thoroughly impressed. I also had experience back in 71. I was just a class 9 student, 14 to 15 years old, left my parents to join the Mukti Bahini or the Liberation Force to India. And I remember in Agartala, my experience with those refugee camps, and if you compare that, I will tell government has managed pretty well. But there, the answer has to be the unique of geo-NGO partnership. I think people forget that Bangladesh has, we have the largest NGO in the world, which is BRAC, and there are X number of NGOs, and this geo and NGO partnership worked in an absolutely fascinating manner. So this is something to learn. But the response, to be very frank, now that it's already nearly 2 years, and I see increasingly that the gaze is shifting from Myanmar to Bangladesh. I think that's very unfortunate. It's unfortunate because, as the High Commissioner was saying, and also Chris, that this time we have evidence of genocide or crime against humanity. Anywhere in the world, when a crime against humanity takes place, or war crime or genocide, it cannot remain bilateral. It cannot remain bilateral. It becomes international by definition. This is the issue. The second issue is Rohingyas are not only in Bangladesh. Probably Nur Islam will be able to say more on that. At least in my estimate, there are 19 countries, and we have figures on that. They're spread throughout the world. So it's not only the issue of Bangladesh, they remain stateless in X number of the countries in the world, though Bangladesh, probably, we have the largest number of them. So the gaze ought to be on Myanmar, and this is something, those who are sitting in front of me and working in different areas ought to remember when it comes to response. Yes, Bangladesh has done to whatever it has. And if you compare now US-Mexico border and see some of the footages, believe it or not, I think we can take some little bit of pride that Bangladesh has done a little bit better than Donald Trump in its border. So given that context, I think the response is one area where I'm sure today and tomorrow we need to talk more about that. The second one is the issue of protection. Now, my High Commissioner has already talked a little bit on that, of the Bhashan Char area, and I understand that that's the only thing that has been tweeted around already. Let's be very objective of what is happening. Well, around 98,000, 100,000 are really in a vulnerable situation in the slopes. Out of 1.1 million, 100,000 are really in a vulnerable situation where they are staying today. These are the people that need to be moved somewhere, today or tomorrow. Last year we were lucky that the rainfall was not that much, and I remember going immediately after the heavy rainfall, and Bangladesh, we have a serious rainfall and the cloud burst and all. We were lucky that it was not that much, but you can be lucky once, you can't be lucky every year. So we really don't know what will happen this time. So these odd 100,000 that we are talking about have to be moved somewhere. And one idea is Bhashan Char. I understand there are critics. If they are, I always tell them, I say it also in Bangladesh to the international community, please, if you have other options, if you want to take them, it's fine. But don't tell us after a crisis or after they suffer a climatic condition, this year, and you say, something has gone wrong, that would not be acceptable. So what do you do with that? And this is something that we need to keep. So when it comes to protection, the annual cost is over 950 million. Not all of that is coming. I guess Bangladesh did what it could, because we also have a growth which is 6% plus for quite some years, and I think that also helped Bangladesh to work on managing these refugees. The last one, in last 1 minute or so, is the issue of justice. Chris has pointed out on some of the facts that they have outlined. I think it's important, and I've been telling my government also, that even if 100% goes back, let's take it hypothetically, even if 100% goes back, the issue of genocide and crime against humanity and war crime will not go away. Because in the 70s and the 90s, we did not have ICC. We did not have genocide we did not have rape as a genocidal offense. Now, rape is considered a genocidal offense, and not to mention, we also did not have R2P, right to protection. So these are the legal instruments that was not there. Now we have. So the issue of justice has to be brought in. As we speak, our Prime Minister is in China, and we understand that China is an important player. And I've been telling also to the Chinese scholars whenever I have opportunity to meet that, look, it is in your interest that you should resolve the problem. Why? Because they want to invest in One Belt, One Road, both in Myanmar and Bangladesh. And that investment also, part of Arakan is included. So I've been telling them that, look, for your economic interest, you need to resolve this particular issue, because you cannot invest billions of dollars where the international community is saying a genocide has been committed. So I think they understand a little bit, only that they don't trust Aung San Suu Kyi at all. That's the other problem. And we can go, I'm sure, today and tomorrow we'll be discussing more in details of all those politics that goes inside China and inside Myanmar. But the fact remains, the issue of justice ought to be done. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now have Dr. Zali, who's the coordinator of the Free Rohingya Coalition.
I have some slides, but I will only show a few. Good morning, and thank you, everybody. Particularly, I want to thank 3 individuals, actually more like single out and pay my tribute. One is, Nurul Islam, who has fed all kinds of historical documentations, because he's the man who has been involved in most of his life, 50 plus years in this cause. Without Nurul's help, I and my wife, Natalie, who will be speaking here tomorrow, will not be able to conduct what we have conducted. And then the second person, who's no longer here in this world, is my thesis advisor. He was the American military intelligence officer and German English interpreter who interrogated the SS officers in 1945. And also he wrote his PhD dissertation on SS and particularly Heinrich Himmler. So I studied under him for 6 years at Wisconsin, and he sensitized me to the issue of mass atrocities. And his work was one of the pioneering works published in 1950s when the archives were not yet scavenged properly. And the third one is my wife, who will speak, because I was Burmese, Buddhist, came from a family that has served in the armed forces, which is now the instrument of genocide, since its inception in 1942-43 during the Second World War under fascist patronage. And I was also a military officer, cadet admit at the age of 16 in 1979. And so had I stayed the course, meaning I joined the armed forces, I would be one of the military commanders, either committing atrocities or issuing commands, because my contemporaries are shoe-ins for the next commander-in-chief in their mid-50s. That said, I have 5 points I want to speak on. Chris Sidoti has very admirably, shared his findings, the fact-finding mission findings with all of us this morning. So I will stay away from the genocide legal coding, the intent, and also what I think is a deeply flawed interstate treaty, Genocide Convention. And most of you know there are 2 major documents that were adopted in 1948 on December 9th and December 10th. The 9th was the Genocide Convention, and the 10th was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And these documents were shelved for the next 50 years because of the Cold War. And the architects of the United Nations or the current interstate system did not mean it when they say human rights, or prevention or punishment of genocide. The Genocide Convention with respect to the Rohingya, it was shelved for 50 years, from 1948 to 98, when Rwanda case was brought, as a trial. And one of the drafters of the UN Security Council resolution that set up the Rwanda Tribunal is a very dear friend of mine, Gregory Stenton, a known genocide scholar and head of the Genocide Watch. That's why he said, by the time the courts arrived, everyone's dead. That's the case of the Burmese genocide. Yeah? And that has been the case of all genocide. Name a single continent that human lives where we have not witnessed or experienced or undergone a genocide. Name anyone. From the Americas to Australia to Africa to the heart of Europe to Asia. In the last 40 years or 50 years, Asia has experienced mass atrocities. And Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, and now Burma. And we have not grown up. We made a fool ourselves. We actually insulted. We insult. Every time we ignore never again, we insult the deads of Auschwitz, the deads in the killing fields of Khmer Rouge, or the Rwandans, Bosnians at Srebrenica. I'm a Buddhist. I was raised Buddhist. I don't wear Buddha symbol. I wear never again. Here's a little pin, €3 from Dhaka. Yeah. And the receptionist who sold us this, me and my Rohingya brother, Nisan Ren, he said, when she realized that he is Rohingya and Burmese, he said, the world never learns from history or us meaning the Germany. So the conception is simple, straightforward, and there's no legal splitting. Genocide essentially means intentional destruction of a national community, a group of people, population, multiply from the very foundation of physical existence to the spiritual foundations, what type of God they worship or godlessness that they embrace. Yeah? And so that's why, like, when lawyers and scholars debate whether there is genocidal intent, but the most brilliant response to that conceptually, I'm a social scientist and not a lawyer, so I won't speak legally. Amartya Sen and I shared a panel at Harvard in 2014 November. He said, as you know, Professor Sen is a world leading authority on famines and well-being and poverty. He said, if you deny a people, the right to livelihood, the right to nutritional opportunities, the right to earn an income, the right to life's essential services, medicine, preventative or emergency or long-term care, and the right to literacy, to nurture your community intellectually so that you can develop and flourish. There's only one intent. There's only one intent to have done all of that. And my country, Myanmar, has done all of that. And this is not new. Genocide did not begin with the killings, under the false pretext of responding to quote-unquote Islamic or Muslim terrorists on August 24th or 25th, 2017. The genocide began and evolved. The genocide began as an attempt by Myanmar military leadership that have adopted anti-Muslim, anti-foreign racism as an institutionalized policy since 1962. Rohingyas' existence 10 years after the French Revolution. The Rohingya existed as a cohesive community. This is from the Asiatic Research Society conference held in Calcutta, 1799. Citizenship law. Burmese citizenship law was adopted, or like this is the original constitution. 4 elements of citizenship. 3 are related to blood. 1 is on geographic residency. Anyone who existed within the territories of British Empire at the time of the independence transfer will be entitled. And then that was followed. That's, everyone has equal citizenship right. But the caveat is like Article 12 of the Constitution takes away what the other Article 11 gives. It said the Parliament can deny and cancel any group citizenship or add any new group citizenship. Yeah. And so what the Burmese are doing is constitutional and legal. The same way what Germany did in the 1930s was made lawful. All genocides are, within the context of the nation state, all genocides are lawful. And finally, I don't have a lot of time. So what I do is, I have this is my late great uncle. He was the deputy commander-in-chief of all Rakhine commands in Rakhine. Today is actually, I don't know if you, younger generation Rohingyas remember, today is very important day, 4th of July. Today was the day that the Rohingya surrendered in exchange for full citizenship, recognition of their ethnic identity, and peaceful coexistence, not just coexistence, integration in Burma. And my great uncle was there. And so I am here in his memory to say that I stand here, speak truthfully against my country. And finally, there are different waves. See, look, the world does not have an excuse. Bangladesh does not have an excuse. United Nations does not have an excuse that they did not know the nature, the genocidal nature of Burmese persecution. Clippings from 1978, Far Eastern Economic Review, Burma's brand of apartheid. The second one, a story of rape, arson, murder, and destruction. You copy, cut, and paste, change the byline, exactly the same story. So these are waves of persecution, and the various rationales have been offered with the single intent to destroy Rohingya, because we only have 3 classes of people in Burma. One, Burmese Buddhists, to which I belong, the majority that control all institutions. Second, non-Burmese, maybe Buddhists like Rakhine or Shan, but non-dominant groups. They are to be incorporated, integrated into the body politics of our country as second-class citizens. And third, people like Rohingya that are deemed the potential proxy for neighboring Bangladesh, they need to be eliminated. This is in consonant with all other genocide, particularly Nazi genocide. In genocidal situation, there are multiple groups who are victimized. And in this case, Rohingyas are the only and most spectacularly wrong people. There are other ethnic communities as well. Thank you very much.
I'd like to call on Dr. Azim Ibrahim, who is Research Professor at the Strategic Studies Institute of the US Army War College and Director at the Center for Global Policy in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much, Mary, for putting this forum together. So I shan't take up too much of your time. I'll just quickly, what I intend to do in this presentation is just give you a quick indication of what are the roots of the persecution of the Rohingya. Why is this happening now? Why is this happening on such a scale now? Why there has been no action from the international community, and what has been the role of Aung San Suu Kyi, and I'll touch upon what I believe is the future of the Rohingya. So the main accusation against the Rohingya that is made is that this term Rohingya is a manufactured term, that this term simply did not exist in history, and these Rohingya are all illegal immigrants from Bangladesh that came over in 1952, and some of the Burmese actually put a date, a further detailed date on it to say this, and this term was manufactured in March of 1952, and before that time, this term simply did not exist. So one of the things I did in my book is to try to examine the veracity of that accusation. So you have it here, that this term Rohingya simply does not exist. So I dug up documents, multiple documents, including ones from the Indian National Archives in New Delhi, This is from the British Colonial Office, dated 1826 by Charles Patton. And in these documents, you can clearly see that the term Rohingya is actually used. So this accusation simply does not stand up to historical scrutiny, even though I believe it's completely immaterial to the current situation, but I simply wanted to point that out. So in terms of the current crisis, how did all of this start? So when the Japanese invaded what was at that time British Burma in the Second World War, the majority Buddhist population supported the Japanese invaders, believing that the Japanese are going to be victorious and this is going to lead to swifter independence from the British, whereas the minority Rohingya population stayed loyal to the British colonial masters. So when the country did become independent in 1948, there was bad blood between the two people because the Rohingya were seen as having not supported the Buddhist majority population in their struggle for independence. But despite that, there was relative calm up until 1962, when there was a coup by the military chief, General Ne Win, and he tried to implement what he called the Burmese Road to Socialism, which was a communist manifesto, and it was a complete economic disaster. So he did what a lot of military rulers do in that situation when things start to go wrong, is that they start to look for scapegoats on whom to blame all the ills of society. And the Rohingya minority, who were already looked at with suspicion, who looked different culture, different language, different feature, were the perfect minority for choice to blame all the ills of society. General Ne Win also became much more overt in his Buddhist outlook and started making statements such as only Buddhists can be loyal citizens to this country and none of these other people could ever be loyal Burmese. A number of laws were passed which culminated in the 1982 Citizenship Act, which stripped all the Rohingya of their nationality, making them amongst the largest stateless people in the world. General Ne Win was eventually overthrown in a revolution, but his regime stayed intact, even though he was removed, and the regime became even more ethnocentric. So the question is, from that point on, the Rohingya have faced wave after wave of violence, being expelled from the country. But the key question is, why is this happening now in 2017? Why did this explode on such a scale? If I am arguing that this has been going on since the Second World War, why is this happening on this scale now? So we have a number of genocide scholars here in the audience, and all of them will tell you that it is very common in the situations of genocide for the perpetrators of the genocide to undertake a dry run, to undertake a test run to see what is going to be the reaction of the international community, what is going to be the reaction of local actors. Are we able to get away with this? Are we able to take this up a couple of notches and execute the final solution? So the military in Myanmar undertook a test run in October 2016, when an organization called ARSA undertook an attack on a number of security outposts that left a number of security officials dead. In response, the military engaged in massive human rights violations. And this is just some of the satellite imagery from Human Rights Watch at the time, November 2016. This is one of the villages before, and this is after. This is another village before, and this is after. And these are some of the villages that were being destroyed by the Buddhist extremists at the time. And the key lesson that the military learned, so the military learned 3 critical lessons from this exercise in October 2016. The first lesson that they learned is that Aung San Suu Kyi defends the military in public. Aung San Suu Kyi has become a shield for all criticism against the military in the public domain. So, for example, when the BBC journalist Fergal Keane said that there's ethnic cleansing going on in your country, she said ethnic cleansing is far too strong a term to use for what is happening. Both sides are equally to blame. So drawing a moral equivalence between the aggressor and the victim. When the United Nations Human Rights Commission called for a full-scale inquiry, she said this will not be very helpful, and it was her office that refused to give the UN visas. Now, I accept she does not control the military directly, but she does. She is the foreign minister and she is the interior minister, and she controls the visas, and she refuses and continues to refuse to give the UN access. When the United Nations also did a report in March 2017 saying that 52% of Rohingya females had been raped, she said on her Facebook page that this is fake rape, and she refused to take the statement back. So this is the first thing that the military learned. Aung San Suu Kyi defends the military in the public domain. That's the first reason. The second reason is that despite all the evidence, ethnic cleansing, genocide, rapes, burning villages, the European Union still laid out a red carpet for the military. General Min Aung Hlaing went on a spending spree around Europe for buy armaments, and I wrote to both the ambassadors of Germany and Austria. They did not respond, so I published letters online, and this you can see is May 2017, months before the current crisis erupted, because all Myanmar watchers knew exactly what was going to happen. You know, these things were quite obvious, that the military is militarizing the region. They're on a spending spree. They're essentially gearing up for a massive offensive. So almost everybody realized that, and the army chief was given literally a red carpet around Europe. So they realized that, look, there's not much consequence despite all our actions. So that's the second thing that they learned, is that the European Union still rolls out a red carpet for us. And the third thing the military learned is that the military suddenly became very popular in Myanmar. The military in Myanmar was very unpopular, which is what forced them to have elections in the first place. But after this exercise against the Rohingya, they suddenly became very popular as the defenders of Buddhist values against these invading hordes of Muslims from Bangladesh. And so the military realized that, look, our popularity has gone up dramatically as the defenders of Buddhist values. So in 2016, the military learned these three lessons, and they said, look, we can actually take this up a notch, and hence why they planned this entire exercise. Now, the next question is, why has there been no action from the international community? You know, as Dr. Zarni said, you know, we've said repeatedly, never again, but we are standing here saying yet again. And I believe there's three reasons for this as well. Number one, that the Rohingya essentially are right at the bottom of the ladder in terms of international representation. There's hardly anyone amongst them on the international stage in the European Union or in the British Parliament, in the European Parliament of Rohingya origin. There's nobody of Rohingya origin and working for Al Jazeera or CNN that can take this up as a pet project. There's nobody of Rohingya origin working in Silicon Valley that's made millions from an app. I can say, I'm going to put $5 million of my money into a public awareness campaign. These people are literally right at the bottom of the food chain. They had hardly any sort of representation globally. That's the first reason I believe, that they're unable to advocate for themselves globally. The second reason I believe is the role of China. When President Obama was in office, he visited Myanmar on 2 occasions. For any country to get a visit from the President of the United States is a very big deal. Why did Obama visit Myanmar on 2 occasions? Because they believe that as Myanmar opened up, it was one of the most closed societies in the world. It's going to fall into the sphere of influence of China. All of Southeast Asia is now being reconfigured and redeveloped to meet one purpose, and that's China's insatiable demand for resources. And so China has aspirations to be a global superpower, but before it can become a global power, it must become a regional power. And that means keeping its regional nuclear rival, India, in check. Access to Myanmar gives it access to the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. They can thus surround India. So you have these geopolitical machinations going on between superpowers, India, China, United States, and then you insert this group called the Rohingya, who nobody's ever heard of. It does not fit into that equation. And the third reason I believe is the myth of a military coup. This idea that if we put too much pressure on Myanmar, there might be a military coup, the military might come back. And this is a myth, because the military is actually in the perfect position right now in Myanmar. They have power without any accountability, which is the holy grail of politics. They can get on with all the genocide, not just against the Rohingya, but almost every ethnic group without any accountability at all from the international community. So I will leave it at that, and I'll be happy to take questions later. Thank you very much.
Islam, who was chairman of the Arakan Rohingya National Organization.
Thank you very much. Actually, the time constraint, and I am to speak on the recommendations. Before leaving that, I just like to point out something. Rohingyas are a people living in Arakan with a long history. Rohingya crisis is not an issue of illegal immigration. This is just an intolerance. It is a case of ethnic, religious, and the political persecution to read Arakan of the Muslim population. As you've seen, say, in 2017, the world was appalled by the hundreds and thousands of innocent images of hundreds and thousands of innocent children, women, and Rohingya men fleeing their homeland, escaping persecution, escaping the crimes against humanity and genocide, and their families were massacred, even houses burned down, and then children were thrown into flames. And this has been foreseen about more than 140,000 people to escape to take shelter in Bangladesh. And the UN fact-finding missions has termed it crimes against humanity and genocide. Today, Bangladesh is a home to 1.2 million Rohingya, including those who came after 25 August 2017. And we are very much thankful to the government and people of Bangladesh for welcoming us and showing solidarity in a bold, merciful, and humanitarian gesture despite economic constraints of the nation. The plight of the Rohingya is the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time. Close to 500,000 people still remain in Arakan. They are surviving in confined villages, ghettos, and at the same time, this is like a concentration, camp in Arakan, and with what the human rights and the international aid organization describe the condition as the worst in the world. And this humanitarian community has responded. This is admirably. However, still we need greater support for the refugee camps in Bangladesh so that refugees live with dignity. But we are mindful that humanitarian aid cannot address the symptoms of the challenge. Humanitarian aid can only address the symptom of the challenges. It cannot address the root cause of the Rohingya crisis. Many of our refugee children, they lack education, and they need quality and formal education, and which can give them a skill to rebuild their communities in future. Adequate security, protections from human trafficking, and sufficient treatment and the mental health services are urgent needs in the refugee camp. The Rohingya villages have been bulldozed without a tree standing, destroying any potential evidence of crimes against humanity and erasing any signs of former existence of Rohingya civilizations. Their land has been declared a state ownership with sinister intention of establishing more Buddhist settler villages and so-called economic zone in collaboration with China. However, the foremost priority to the Rohingya people is to return home, but they cannot return where bloodshed and violence and the genocide is still ongoing. The sad truth is that Myanmar government has no intention of creating sustainable return condition for the sustainable return of the refugees because they have already fulfilled their purpose. They achieved their goal already. That is elimination of the Rohingya people from Arakan. So Based on I want to call on the UK government and the international community. This is the recommendation. One, increase the pressure on Myanmar and that of its foremost allies, China and Russia. Vocally support the Rohingya people's rights to be legally recognized as an ethnic minority of Myanmar, as well as restoration of their full citizenship, consistent with the other ethnic minorities of Myanmar, and support the use of their ethnic name Rohingya. Recognize the crimes perpetrated against the Rohingya as crimes against humanity and genocide, as indicated by the fact-finding missions. Support the credible accountability efforts to ensure victims see justice served and the cycle of violence not repeated. These include the situation in Myanmar to reference of the situation in Myanmar to the International Criminal Court, and also a state party individually or in cooperation should act according to the Genocide Convention and to hold the state of Myanmar accountable for the International Court of Justice. And additionally, the international community should consider for the establishing international tribunal. And a strengthened targeted sanction against the Myanmar government and its military, including General Miao Lang, all military officials. Even here, I think the Aung San Suu Kyi is not innocent, she is a complicity. And it is important that this is the time to move beyond symbolic sanction and targeted the trade preference, the sanction and the concrete economic interests of the military should be targeted. Trade preference must be linked to condition on human rights and the need to see tangible progress in the condition affecting the Rohingya people. Support efforts to establish a stabilization force. I don't say here peacekeeping force. A stabilization force under an independent international community in order to facilitate peaceful repatriation process, to protect the Rohingya inside Myanmar and stem further violence, and to help build peaceful coexistence between Rohingya and other ethnic groups in the country, and increase support for Rohingya refugees in camps in Bangladesh who are desperate in need of education, security, adequate healthcare, and other humanitarian needs. Support programs that provide mental health and trauma rehabilitation programs for the Rohingya, targeting in particular children and those who have been impacted by sexual violence. Rohingya must be directly consulted. Rohingya must be directly consulted, included, and involved in decision making to ensure that their views shape the terms of all future repatriation process efforts and meet their demand for protected return to protect the homeland, that is their place of origin, access to security, justice, livelihood, healthcare, education, social welfare, and compensation. Thank you very much.
Finally, Dean Mohammed Nouri, who is chair of the Arrogant Rohingya Organisation UK.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, our elders, our historical people, obviously, they have already told you many stories regarding Rohingya people, who are the most persecuted people in the world, described by the United Nations. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak in front of you today. My name is Dean Mohammed Nouri. I was born in Burma, but was brought up to the refugee camps in Bangladesh, where my parents are still living. Today, I'm not going to speak about the history of Myanmar, about the history of the Rohingya people, but I would like to talk about I will take 5 minutes, but I will talk about education. Why our Rohingya people are not being allowed to have the education, access to formal education, whether in Bangladesh or in Burma or in other way in the world. Because our people have been living in Bangladesh since 1992. And I was one of those. And I had only a little bit chance to study inside the refugee camps in Bangladesh. Most of the education stops at the age of 10 in Bangladesh, which is year 5, KS2 in this country. After that, people have to stop the education because there's no any other facility to carry on. And then people try to find the jobs in Bangladesh. And the children of Rohingya people, they're just growing up without education in Bangladesh. Nothing else. They're just becoming like a growing up jobless, educationless, like no education, like uneducated people. Like I studied only up to class 5, like which is to the age of 10, and I had to finish my study because there wasn't any other the further education in Bangladesh. And then I tried to gain knowledge from my elders in refugee camps. And then when I became age 17, and then I tried to to do the job. And then I contact with the UNHCR in Bangladesh because the education sector, the department is implemented by the UN and the UNHCR. So and when I contacted them, because they were looking for the primary teacher in refugee camps, and then they said, "Can you read Bangla? Can you read English? Can you read maths? Can you do maths, the basic maths for the primary school? And can you read Burmese?" I said, "Yes, I can do this." So and then they immediately employed me, and I started teaching without any qualification. How is strange for the Rohingya people with no qualification, people trying to make their community to be educated in Bangladesh. But the issue, our demand is to the international community, why our people not allowed to have the access to formal education in Bangladesh and in Burma. If you know, since 2012, the Myanmar government stopped the Rohingya people not to have the education, even the primary basic education in Rakhine state. So why is happening? Why our Rohingya people are not being cared by the people of this world? What's happening? What's going on? This is our question, and this is the most important thing that human need, the people need in their life to make life a better. So our people just growing up with no education, Please come forward and they do something for the Rohingya people who have been living in Bangladesh without any basic human rights. So we request you today to have to do something for the education of the Rohingya people, so to make sure they can get a better life, so they can make their life a better. They can take their life in better position. So we want life like a beautiful life other people have in this world, and then we want to make sure they were getting the education in Bangladesh as well as in Myanmar, who have been the refugees who were confined by the Burmese government there in IDP camps. So we are here to demand to let them people know what about our situations, about our basic human rights, about our people, and about the genocide going on. So basically, my brothers, I've got the brothers, and they're just growing up with no education in Bangladesh. So I asked them why. Because we are here in the UK, but we can't help you anywhere because it's not going through. So, but in the meantime, what we can do, we can let the international community know about you and about the education, about the basic rights that you are not having, you are not getting in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, and the other way in the country. Like the gentleman said, there are the 19 countries where the Rohingya people are living. So today, why is happening? Because of the Myanmar government. Aung San Suu Kyi said even she refused to use the term of Rohingya. So why is she is refusing? Why is she so scared of the Rohingya people? Why she is not using this term? So that means there is something the fact behind using the Rohingya term in Myanmar. So that's why today I would like to request our people and the international community to make sure that our people get in the educations in Bangladesh and in Myanmar, because without education, how people can stand up. So because education, I give an example as a backbone of the nation. So if you don't have the backbone, and how can you stand up? So this is the very important right for the Rohingya people. So please come forward and do something for the Rohingya people to make sure they get a better life. Thank you very much.
Very much indeed. If you keep it silent, that's amazing. It's fantastic set of contributions, really interesting, informative, enlightening, and concise. I'd like now to open it up for audience discussion. Yeah, up there.
I didn't expect yourself to be the first speaker. I mean, the last speaker's delivery was absolutely right. But when he said about education, if you look to the earlier part of the 20th century, the Rohingya population, or what is called the Rohingya population, were an entirely integrated community of men. There were doctors, lawyers, professors, local merchants, fabulously wealthy farmers, there were policemen. They were also involved in the political life of London. So these people were active members of their society in every way. Look back to 1948, and it's not just, the other thing to remember, I think the other one, as I mentioned, this fact that it's not just Rohingya, many other minority communities like the Kachin, Karen, and others are also equally victims of this, of ethnic cleansing, regular pogroms, and genocide for decades and decades and decades. In 1948, or after independence, as you know, the Rohingya population was culled massively, in fact, for being the side of the British. So the very people, the Burmans, who had supported the Japanese and the Nazis in the Second World War, sided with the British to get their independence. And on gaining independence, they actually went on to murder between 50 and 100,000 Rohingya people. This is the earliest sign of genocide that was to come later on, of course, from 70s onwards. The point is this: the education thing is very key. At the beginning of the 20th century, you find a Rohingya population which is educated, productive, professors, lawyers, and doctors in the society. And by the 70s, They're no longer doctors, lawyers, professors, or even farmers. They're actually subsistence people. It reminds you of the sort of Holocaust as well. Look, it reminds you of also happened in the Jews in the 1930s. These were doctors, lawyers, chemists, professors in your community, and then overnight they become ghettoized, non-people entities. So they become, if you like, subhuman because they're no longer part of the civilized world of the educated world. This is a deliberate attempt to deny the humanity of the people. And the unfortunate thing is this. I think, by the way, one thing we must never forget, I apologize for going on like this. The people of Hong in particular are to be commended, actually, for the last 70 years perseverance, actually, and they have done. I can't think of another population anywhere in the world who have had to endure this for decade after decade. Since 1948, they've been enduring this. And since the 80s and 90s, you know what has happened in Burma, continues in prison. And they're actually, I think we must remember these people actually from Jericho. But the point is this: Bangladesh alone cannot do this. It also needs the countries like Indonesia, and Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines to be part of this process. Check. What is the point? India, unfortunately, is one of Bangladesh's best friends, even Nepal isn't particularly friendly towards India, but Bangladesh. However, India has played how can I put it, a double game in this. The New York Times, about 3 years ago, produced an article which showed how Hindu fundamentalists are actually advising the fanatical entity. I don't want to call them Buddhists, by the way. Those people are not Buddhists. Lord Buddha was a son of Bengal. We Bengali, my own inheritance is Buddhist. My forefathers was Buddhist before they became Muslim. We are proud of our Buddhist heritage. This has nothing to do with Buddhism. And the Burmans who were pagan people in China, when they came as refugees to the land which is now Burma, they were converted to Hmong people. The Hmong people themselves were converted to Buddhism by Bengali monks, my forefathers. The point I'm making is that this is not a religious conflict. This is a conflict with Burma hegemony over all the ethnic groups in Burma. And I think the world has to wake up and take some action against it.
Thank you very much indeed. There's a lady at the back. I'm going to take several contributions before returning to the panel for their responses. So the lady at the back.
Thank you. I'm Natalie from American University of London. I think this conference is testament to the enormous growth of research on the Rohingya at the moment. And sometimes it's led to conversations about the Rohingya being over-researched as well. And I wonder if we could ask the panel how, as researchers, we can ensure that our research is both ethical and can contribute to the desperate need for action and change. Thank you.
Gentleman up there. Yeah.
When Dr. Asim we gave 3 reasons why the international community inaction on Rohingya. He listed a few, 3. One of them is the myth that Rohingya coup if Aung San Suu Kyi continues action on this. You can see a parallel with this. It's happening in Sri Lanka as well. Whenever we ask for international investigation, they said if we press on this current government, which is pro-West or neoliberal, will be toppled by the opposition. The opposition will become more worse, and they may lead to China. So this argument is generally board by the general public in the West, they sort of justify, okay, that's the reason. If we press on Burma, then we end up in military war, etc. How do you handle this situation? How do you enlighten, or how do you react to this situation? Thank you.
The lady down here.
Hi, so I was just really curious to talk about education. I actually own an online education company and I study the Rohingyas. And so I was curious, on an opportunity you mentioned with businesses or with app development, has there ever been talk of design of an education system? Has there ever been a development strategy for education to be implemented, funding? I'd be really curious just on any background that any of you have experienced in your careers. So I looked online, but since all of you have first-hand experience, I'd love to hear that.
Just two more before we give them a chance to answer. The lady down here and then the gentleman there. Microphone.
Thank you all for sharing very much your hearts. Two particular things occur to me that might be helpful. On the education front, you could hear the Shamsha Ali, a leading Bangladesh physicist. He is going around the country educating children in rural areas. I was always passionate about the work of religions abroad. And he is using very Victorian education methods, and where there's no equipment at all, he teaches everything relates it back to the natural world. And where there's no equipment, he simply uses a stick and sand. And I'm in contact with him. He's going to be writing 4 or 5 books on tour. And if anybody was to make a proposal for him to be involved in the education, I'd be happy. I can't speak for him, obviously, but I'd be very happy to forward it and ask him if he could possibly assist. And the other brief point, as some of you may know, the BBC has not renewed the contract with Mark Tully, and so he's currently at a little bit of a sort of pause in his life. And it occurred to me that if funding could be found, he could possibly do a very, very powerful documentary drawing on all the things that we've shared here. It could be potentially a very compelling documentary. I am in touch with them, but he's in UK early training meeting up soon. So if that was of interest, if anyone could put together some funding, I think people like themselves would be wonderful people to interview and proceed in a public documentary.
Thank you. Just a quick question. While we've got some experts, professors and researchers on genocide studies like this, the term genocide, the term crime against humanity, war crimes, or however else you might want to describe it, have been used. But the real important question is not how do we achieve accountability, but how soon can accountability be reached, and what are the processes of reaching that accountability.
Okay, so a chance for the panel now to do a round of responses. Would you like to?
I'll tackle the question on Aung San Suu Kyi and the Sri Lankan parallels. So one of the most common questions that I get, and I've met with policymakers around the world on the situation, is the position of Aung San Suu Kyi. You know, policymakers will ask me, does she have a gun held to her head? Why is she behaving the way she is, etc. And it seems to be a real enigma for many of them. So I got a piece in Newsweek. It was last year or the year before. It was titled "How We Were Seduced by Aung San Suu Kyi." And for that piece, I interviewed half a dozen people who have known her intimately for decades. They have known her intimately. One of them used to smuggle papers to her in prison at huge risk to himself. The other one was the founder of the Free Aung San Suu Kyi campaign. All of them told me on the record, and it's all in the public domain, that Aung San Suu Kyi is a racist and a nationalist. She has always been a racist and nationalist. You look at some of her early writings, and you see basically that come through very clearly. And it was we in the West who put her on a pedestal, because we in the West have a need to have our heroes untarnished. We like to have them on a pedestal. And her story is probably one of the best stories you'll ever hear. You know, here is the daughter of one of the founding generals of Myanmar, of Burma, educated at Oxford, speaks the Queen's English, beautiful, articulate. You know, now she's going back to her country. She's been jailed by the generals, but she's out of prison. She's opening up her country to democracy and free markets. And this is fantastic. We love this stuff. You know, we love this stuff. People have come to the West to taste our way of life, our democracy, and you know, the educated here are going back to their country, their backward countries, and they're going to turn their backward country into our country. You know, we in the West love that, and we make this mistake over and over again. If you remember Bashar al-Assad, the London-trained ophthalmologist who proved to be the great reformer, being quoted by Tony Blair, turned into one of the greatest mass murderers of our time. You remember Kim Jong-un, educated at Swiss boarding school, loves basketball in Disneyland, he's threatening us all with nuclear annihilation. You Simon Gaddafi, PhD from the London School of Economics. You know, it happens over and over again. We think, oh, these people speak like us, they've tasted our democracy, but we fail to realize that they're ideologically committed. And Aung San Suu Kyi has been a Burma Buddhist nationalist, and all of her early writings indicate that very clearly. So this is not an enigma in terms of why she's taken this position that she has. Now, the second question about the education, there is no issue, I believe, in terms of resources for education. I am hugely admirable, I admire hugely the efforts of the Bangladeshi government to take in Rohingya as they have. This is a hugely fantastical effort. However, the Bangladeshi government is also has a policy, a very strict policy to ensure, and some would argue rightly so, that these Rohingya will never become permanent in Bangladesh. So even when they were reinforcing the camps for the monsoon, they ensured that no concrete or permanent material was used. It's only temporary material. And they do not want to make the lives of the Rohingya too comfortable in the eventuality that some sort of dream is stuck with Myanmar or somewhere else that they can repatriate the Rohingya, and the Rohingya will think, hang on a minute, we have educational facilities here, we have freedom here, our kids are getting good schooling. Why on earth do we want to go back to Myanmar? We're much better off here. So they have restricted the education initiative. It's not a question of resources, there's more than enough NGOs and charities willing to provide it. The Bangladeshi government has essentially restricted it because of their own policy. Now, NGOs are now trying to work around this by offering play groups and everything else, but there is no official educational initiative going on in the camp. So I'll leave it at that.
Just three very brief points. First, to the gentleman's question, or issue that you raised that other ethnic minorities suffer. But I will put that into in the following fashion. Burma is a post-independent colonial entity, internally colonial entity. And like all colonial states or systems, they're racial apartheids, not just economic exploitation. What we, the Burmese, inherited from Britain was a better political system than, say, the old feudal system where there was no such thing as citizen or people. But that said, having said that, because the British negotiated independence with the dominant group, that was the best and easiest, quickest way out of any political mess that the British created, whether it's in Malaysia or Sri Lanka or Burma. So I make the strong argument that post-independent colonial states came with either the seeds of apartheid internally, or when they go, to the other extreme, we have a genocidal situation. Whether we're talking about Buddhist majority Sri Lanka with the Tamil genocide, or the Burmese situation, or the same in like Indonesia. Yeah? And you put hundreds of ethnic groups, however many, 5, 6, 7, yeah, turn power equations upside down. and straitjacket them into a political system which will be run by a racist, narrow-minded, illiberal, nationalist elites. That's what we have. So I would say these are inevitable genocide. That's Africa, here, Latin America. Yeah. And secondly, I think, as I said, there are three classes of populations: the dominant, the rulers, and among the dominant, the military is the most dominant, and they rule over the civilian population the last 56 years. And then the second type of population that will be allowed to live as subjugated second-class assimilated populations. That include Karens and Kachins and others. Their problem is they are defiant politically, and rightly so. But the third and last category of population is the Rohingyas, and then increasingly, I fear, Muslims. And their identity, their very presence in the state that defines itself mono-racially and in terms of mono-faith, dominant Buddhism. There's nothing absolutely you can do. There is no conflict between the Burmese and, the Rohingyas and the Burmese state, because genocides are anything but conflict. If genocides are presented as conflicts, or its symptoms are picked out as humanitarian crisis or Rohingya crisis, it's like we are repeating this Jewish question. There is no Jewish question, only the Nazi question. The same way there is no Rohingya question or problem or crisis. This is a crisis of Burma. And then this crisis has been maintained for 40 years. And finally, my remark is, genocidal discourses, conceptually or legally, are so focused only partially on the perpetrating state. I was behind my last comment. I was behind the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. Behind the bulletproof glass, where brother number 2, Nonche, asked in his closing statement while declaring innocent, hey, what about the Americans that created the conditions in which we had to evacuate Phnom Penh? And of course, they went ahead and committed, the genocide through ground zero concept. So there are international actors, from Neville Chamberlain calling Hitler a gentleman, or Queen Elizabeth calling Ne Win a nice chap after a high tea at Buckingham Palace. And the same thing. And if you look at the genocides are finally societal crime. The fish, the military, the perpetrator, in this case, has to create large enough pond so it can swim. So these are the institutions, my friends, that are involved in varying degrees of complicity and culpability in the Burmese genocide that is going on. So focusing only on the military is not enough. We must call for total boycott of Burma. Yeah? Genocide is not to be treated as business as usual. Thank you.
Let me focus on three things. On the issue of religion, one has to be very careful, and somebody was drawing the parallel with Sri Lanka. There is a serious parallel with Sri Lanka. Buddhism in Myanmar went through Sri Lanka, and this is the Theravada Buddhism that we talk about. Now, if you look into Sri Lanka and Myanmar, both have something which I refer to as Salafi Buddhism. Salafi Buddhism would be the confluence between state and religion. As you see in Saudi Arabia, it's a Salafi Islam, and here also you see the confluence of state and religion. Now that is enormously powerful in getting support. Look at India. After all the experience of democracy, it had to go into something of that kind under BJP. Religion is, I don't want to refer to Marx or opium to the masses, but it does try to bring people to its fold. And so this has to be deconstructed in some way. Somehow, people who say, oh no, this is a military, this is an ethnic issue. Look at the Buddhist monks in Myanmar, how they are portraying the Rohingyas. Look at the Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka, how we have played the Tamils and now the Muslims. One doesn't have to shy from it. It's a serious problem. It has gone into their head. And if it goes, if once the Salaficism goes into your head, it doesn't come out, easily. So this is something that I think we need to address, and it has to be reconstructed. The second point on the issue of on education, well, the policy that Bangladesh has taken is English, Rohingya, and Burmese are the three languages that are provided to the school children, not Bengali. And the idea is that today or tomorrow they will go back to Myanmar. So if they go back to Myanmar, they need to know Burmese, they need to know English. That's the idea. One can be critical of that. UNHCR is critical of that, particularly given their mandate that the local language has to be taught. But this is the policy of the government. But let's look at education seriously. And I see there are people who work on education. The technology that we have now, the laptop that we have, the tablet that we have, you can make the literacy can be 100% in 5 years. These are oral people. If you talk to them, they're fascinating in terms of, the resilience, let's put it that way. I remember the first time, and this was in the month of January 2018, when I took some of my students and was talking to one particular Rohingya, and she had a small child, and there was nothing she had, absolutely nothing. But in the 40 minutes conversation, twice she mentioned that whether I could offer tea and biscuit to Prof. 3 times. Because the biscuit I could understand, I couldn't understand the rest of the language. I went to biscuit, and she wants to offer biscuit and tea to you. I said, wow, that's civilization. A person who doesn't have anything, that's civilization. It doesn't have to be tissue. So this is very rich when it comes to oral civilization. Some of it has not been captured. Common people who work on the Rohingya to look into orality, not to look into the text, on the written text. You're not going to go very far. But if you change the method, you can actually get enormously interesting insights from this particular community. Finally, somebody raised the issue of how soon, and I see my friends are harping on the issue of genocide and all. ICC and ICJ, they take years. It's true. There's no point. Well, ICC has already started. As you know, there was an issue because Myanmar is not an ICC signatory, but Bangladesh is. So there was an issue whether they have the mandate, and they have come up with a concept with 100% that yes, they have the mandate because the victims, took shelter in Bangladesh, which is a signatory. They have started taking one. Yes, this is going to take time. It doesn't matter. But more of these comes, there will be pressure, not so much, it's important, I want to flag, not so much on Myanmar as much on China, or as much on India. You see, you need to see who Myanmar military is banging on. And somehow the banging on, not only for China and Myanmar, China and India, but of course, all the multinational companies who want to invest. So it's time for us to shame them. That look, this is a country which has committed or it is a genocidal intent, there's a case in ICC, there will be a case in ICJ, so why are you, trading with this particular country? So I think it brings pressure. So yes, probably you're right, how soon, if you look at the past record of some of the trials, it takes years, but I still think these are issues which ought to be brought in, because one issue is justice that is not going to go away, even in the 100%. Those who are in Bangladesh, they can be repatriated in the year or two.
Regarding the education in Bangladesh, about the in terms of the language in Bangla language, obviously we Rohingya people in Bangladesh. So the Bangla language, it was not accepted by the people in refugee camps at that time, because we are also that ready to go back to our country as long as we get our rights back from the Burmese government. So unfortunately, in 2009, the Bangla language was brought up by the one of the NGO in Bangladesh, because they wanted to enforce the Bangla language to implement in refugee camps in the schools, so that they wanted to employ the Bangladeshi people as a teacher, primary school teacher in refugee camps. So, but Bangla language we didn't expect in the past, but unfortunately it was enforced by the one of the NGOs in Bangladesh, and then so in 2009 the Bangla language was there. It came there in 2009. So, but the language, it was accepted for those refugees who have been living there since 1992. But what's about the people who recently arrived in Bangladesh since 25th of August 2017? More than 500,000 people cross the border in Bangladesh. So what will happen to these people? So if they can't learn the languages, so how they will deal with the people in Bangladesh? So because still we can't guarantee it, that we can't guarantee that the issue will be sorted out. So, but we can't, even international community, even they are doing hard work, but they are not doing their best, because otherwise the UN Security Council, they can implement their power to the Burmese government. Even Burmese government, they are accusing the Bangladesh government that they are not working together with the Myanmar government in terms of the repatriate people from Bangladesh. So this is each other, they are accusing each other. But Bangladesh government also, they didn't show the good work towards the Rohingya people in the past. But since 2017, they opened the border for the refugees people. Therefore, we appreciate for this to Bangladesh government, and we thank to Bangladesh government for supporting and for coming forward to support these vulnerable people. And the other things, as the Burmese government says, the Rohingya are illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. If they are illegal immigrants from Bangladesh, so that means Arakan, the Rakhine, the part is a part of Bangladesh. So that means Bangladesh should seek help from the international community to get this part as a Bangladesh part, because the Bangladesh people, if Rohingya people are illegal immigrants, so the part is belong to the Bangladesh. So that means we can go that way as well if they want. Otherwise we can. So who will the fight for these people to bring their the rights back to them, like to bring their life normal in Burma? Because at the moment we are not feeling safe to repatriate these people, as everything is we are destroyed in Myanmar to the ground, and there's nothing left. So how people can be repatriated to the country where there's no place for these people? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Regarding education, so far among the refugee population in Bangladesh, more than half are children. Among the children, majority, some of the children age group by 18, under 18, they are without any education. There are some arrangements for the primary level education, but those people who are under 12 to 11 to 15, for these people there should no facility, they don't have access to any land. So this is one thing. These people also, they could not pursue any education in Burma and Burma as well. That's why we have become the most illiterate people in the world, including Burma. So last time when I was visiting Bangladesh, I spoke to the former foreign minister of Ghana. So whether is there any possibility to extend facility to the refugees for education? He was quite, he said, okay, we go to visit the refugee camp. I also told him that we have enough trained teachers in the mountain refugees who can, teach the refugee children. And then he said, all right, we are ready to consider all this. So this is the one thing. And then actually what happened, Bangladesh, as Mr. Azim has said, Bangladesh also fears something that they are trained in Bangladesh, and education in them, they might not do, try to go back. This is one thing. On the other hand, I think we should get some sort of facility in Bangladesh. Regarding this, the problem in Burma, suppose in Rohingya people, we have to, while the country was independent, we have to know this. We rule that country, we defend that territory and treat that country. We share that with the Buddhist community and the Thai community. This is only after we have become part of Burma, then because of the Burmanization policy of divide and rule, assimilation for all these things, and they become Rohingyas were singled out, particularly one military came to power in 1962, and then he made the main target. This is he had taken a national policy to exterminate the Rohingya people. This is why we want to do. This is a strategical reason. This is a strategic area because we are getting to Southeast Asia. This is South Asia. This area we want to make a clean sweep of the communities.
Right, we'll take a couple more questions. Yeah.
Hi everybody. I'm Marlon and I'm from Kosovo, actually, and I'm writing a paper on the role of state in sustainable repatriation and integration of the community in Myanmar. I would truly like to thank UCL for organizing such an event because this is the best way we can advocate against what happened to the Rohingya community. Actually, more or less happened to Kosovo in 1999, because this is what happened to Rohingya. It's nothing more than ethnic cleansing, but it has to draw the attention of the international community. And my question, so I don't want to be so long, my question is that has negotiations started to happen between the state of Myanmar and Bangladesh? And of course, it has to be led by international community, because even in that time what happened in Kosovo 1999, we had China, Russia, and who else against in the UN Security Council. But still, we need to draw the attention of maybe UK, United States of America to take actions, because this is against humanity, and there are laws that we need to support people who are actually who belong to a group of ethnic or religious or ethnic groups. So I just wanted to know what is it happening with the negotiation? Is it hasn't, or has it started or not yet? The dialogue between the international community and Myanmar, or who is leading this? Because I have no clue on this. I haven't heard still. Thank you.
The lady just behind you, and then the gentleman up the back, and the lady down here. So.
Thank you. My name is Isha candidate at University. My question is for both Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Zardi. I agree with Natalie that there is an expansion of research on Latinos in the last 5 years or so. But if there is an under-researched group in this context, that would be the Buddhists who live on the Bangladesh side. And my question is, given that you have traveled to the Bangladesh borderline many times, have you spoken to any Buddhists who live there, Hines and Bartels and otherwise? And And what do you think is the state of Buddhist Muslim relations in the Bangladesh border, given
Hello, my name is Saslim Shikuran, and I retired academic in England and practice about national law. Knowledge to the border. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just one question. I'm not sure whether we can ask question to Christopher Sidoti, Ziran or Vicky or Sweden. Because I was very concerned. The frame of analysis, it was kept unsettled in the 2017. But and good to understand the Rohingya Salvation Army, which I think many of us don't know. So I wanted to know more about how they're being funded and why so much emphasis is given on those if they're not really so important. So that was a question to Christopher Sidoti. But to this panel, we understand about confronting key issues. And I think we know the key issue. One is the repatriation, and the other was legal justice. So I just feel we don't throw baby in the bathwater, because what is the stumbling blocks then? If even members could really explain, if these are the two key issues, what is stopping us in working? Because I find that a kind of despair. We might have lots of research and work we have been doing, but if they could just simply say, this is what we're failing, I would really happy.
So, no, it's the lady down here. The lady down here. Down here. To me, yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So my question or comment is also related to education from my recent experiences of interviewing stakeholders who are implementing education interventions at different levels in Rohingya refugee camps. Is they are also dealing in Norway, so I have to articulate my words really carefully. So we're also dealing with the population who haven't had any access to education in Burma. So when they reached Bangladesh, who only had access to maybe religious mathematics education in Burma. So they are also quite resistant in terms of getting education that is, I would say that education that is provided in learning centers and play labs. And they are more receptive of education that are provided by madrasas and not just set by their community themselves. And also with the adolescents, when the girls they reach puberty, they are not let come to schools. So people there are also dealing with a very vulnerable community who have been deliberately not being given access to education. So it's a real struggle for Bangladesh government and Bangladeshi people working there at different levels to actually make sure that they also to change the mindset of a community who haven't been given access to education for a long time. So I think that's there are very sensitive issues to play around here, and how I don't know how these can be resolved, but this is not very kind of, I can say it's not a very short term. We do not have a very short term intervention, but a very systematic approach is needed to address these issues. So what would be, like, what are your thoughts around that?
So down here from Chris Sidoti.
I'll answer the early question, provided I have permission to ask a question as well.
Sure.
On that basis. Look, we have no evidence that before August 2007, sorry, I stand up. Australian. We have no evidence that before August 2017, ASA had any money or any weapons. As I said, the weapons that were used seem to have been weapons that they captured from police in the preceding October. But we've got no evidence of independent sources of money or even domestic. And you know, they have been built up as the big bogey. And that's been very convenient both for the military and for ASA. For the military, it's given them a great excuse. For ASA, it's made them look pretty important. Now in the camps, though, post-August 2017, things are a bit different. And certainly ASA is present somehow in the camps. There seem to be three reactions. One is that many people are very resentful that they feel they have been conned and used by ASA, and that ASA provided the excuse that the military was looking for and was ready for. And so many, particularly the story I was telling you, that people went charging up the hill to fight police and the military on the basis that they were told that highly trained ASA soldiers were right behind them to come. So there's a lot of resentment that ASA was responsible for what happened. Secondly, there are others who are now feeling that ASA provides an answer, that the trauma, the harm has been so great that they need something to identify. Third, there is also increasing violence and criminality in the camps, and those who are perpetrating it are claiming to be ASA. Whether they are or not, who will ever know. But ASA is now being presented as the big body within the camps to the Rohingya people as a way of extorting money and rape and sexual assault as well. And we don't know who's responsible for that. But in many places we see criminality occurring under the guise of popular movements. So, but whether they're getting money now or weapons now, I don't know. There are some weapons that are starting to go into the camps, but they're not getting weapons.
But are they created for the rational for to go for the fight?
So,
are they created a rational for the Burmese government to go for a fight?
There's no doubt that they've created a rationale, and it's very convenient. Islamic terrorist organisation, very convenient. I said before, we started with extreme skepticism. Our first assumption was that it was entirely manufactured by the military and the Burmese people. But in the end, we were satisfied that there was something, but not much. So, I don't think we should exaggerate. ASA was more important as an excuse up until August 2017. What it will become, no one knows.
I'm glad you say that, because if you go to the camp now, there is also some rumors that some of the Islamic activists are terrorizing or mobilizing their forces in Kutupalong itself.
Exactly. We don't know what's going on, really, but we do know that there is resentment on the one hand. We do know that there is some admiration because they're fighting for us on the other hand, so it's destroying some younger people. But we also know that there is increasing criminality in the name of us. But we don't know if that's necessarily us.
Thank you.
My question now. Look, can I throw you the most difficult question that I keep on worrying about? And that is, when does the suffering of the people become so great that we have to become complicit in genocide? Now, what I mean by that is that the suffering of the people in the camps is extreme, and it shows no sign of end. Bangladesh is clearly taking all the steps that we've described so that they don't feel that they're going to stay. We could talk about something similar to a comprehensive plan of action for the Vietnamese boat people in 1980, where the international community resettled 1.5 million people in 2 or 3 years to address that problem. If we were to do that, we would become complicit in genocide because we destroy the Rohingya community forever. Every Western country could take 25,000 people. That's the end of the problem. And the Rohingya community is gone and the genocide is complete. But we allow these people, I go through the camps and I see Palestinians of 70 years ago. Do we create a situation where in 70 years' time these people, like the Palestinians, are still exiles from their country living in camps? At what point do we have to focus on their suffering, even though we know that it makes us complicit in major crime?
Question. I'm just going to give the panel 30 seconds to respond before we break for lunch.
So I'll address the first question in terms of the negotiations. The negotiations, unfortunately, are going nowhere. This was evident from the outset. Myanmar has zero intention of taking back the Rohingya, and they have zero pressure on them to actually do so. They have spent half a century trying to get rid of these people, and now that they have managed to drive them over the border, as soon as they left, the land was seized, it was burnt down, the village was burnt down, it was built, and it's already been redistributed and being utilised by the Rakhine, the local Rakhine. They also mind the border to make sure that the Rohingya never come back. There's no pressure on Myanmar. What Aung San Suu Kyi specialises in and what the Myanmar government has done in the past is to enter into these negotiations and go through the whole process of discussions with the intention of just buying time until the refugees come up there in Bangladesh. Aung San Suu Kyi specialises in setting up commissions to visit. So she set up multiple of these commissions. I've made congressional delegations that have gone there and met with her, and she's explained to them all that this is a really complicated problem. We've had these issues for over half a century. I've set up this commission, I've got these people on it. And the congressional delegation aren't really aware of the intricacies of the detail. They come back thinking, oh, well, she's doing whatever she can, but this is all just a mechanism to buy time and raise time to visit. And the point I would, further to Chris's point, I would make is that the Rohingya to me are essentially like the Native Americans. The entire civilization has been wiped out. What will it mean for to be a Rohingya 1 generation from now? What is going to happen to their culture, their language, their way of life? It's all going to be diluted into as refugees, and it's happening now. The entire civilization has been wiped out, and unfortunately, Myanmar has no intention of taking them back, and there's absolutely no pressure on them whatsoever. And the final point I'd like to make is that actually the term genocide as well. We have gotten ourselves into this entire exercise of just discussing, is this a genocide, is not a genocide, is a meet this criteria and so on. And so much time and effort goes into that, which I believe is an actual waste of time. The fact is that mass atrocities have been committed, and that should be it. Instead, we are in this academic exercise. Look, this agency declared that genocide and that one hasn't, and this meets this criteria and that criteria. And it takes decades and decades upon to resolve that. And it's just for me, it just seems to be an immaterial exercise.
This is a complete genocide because genocide intention can be complete and be established according to the law. This is different definition. The one thing is this is the way things are going, as Dr. Ibrahim said, Burmese government has not a slightly intention to receive our people because they have received it, they fulfilled their purpose already, elimination of the Rohingya people. So last point I want to say that no genocide can be prevented without intervention. It is a strike with the international community.
Thank you very much again. This is the last thing. In terms of the genocide, in our Burma, obviously as a Rohingya people, it's in a minority. We didn't have the chance to get the more two children. This is the main fact. And the other things, whatever you have in Myanmar, and then you have all the things to be registered with the by the authority of the Myanmar. And for example, if you have a cow, and if you want to go there, then you must inform to the local authority, and then you have to register the cow. And if you after going there, if you say, I want to register my cow because it's my cow, and then they will say, why did you say your cow? It's not your cow, it's our cow, it belongs to us. So because of saying your cow, and then we will not register you, and then leave it to us, and then we will do whatever we will plan, whatever is possible with this cow. And you see, this is the kind of things going on in Myanmar. And in Myanmar, for the Rohingya people, it's not allowed to travel to one place to another place. This is another thing. And the other things in Myanmar, so you don't have any medical facility for the Rohingya people, and then you don't have any travel freedom in Myanmar, and then you don't have any the basic rights like in terms of the education. So nothing at all. So this is the kind of things is been going on since 1962, as well as we have been denied our citizenship in 1982. So this is the things going on over the Rohingya people, as well as in Bangladesh. So we this is the final words to the Bangladesh government. We Rohingya people would like to thank to Bangladeshi people as well as the Bangladesh government for helping us, for showing their solidarity towards Rohingya people. Thank you very much.
First on education, I think Bangladeshi leadership must stop education of the Rohingya as a pull factor. Bangladesh does not offer Rohingya pull factor. Burma offers total and complete push factor called genocide. That's one thing. Second thing on the over research subject. This is an issue that has been going on for 40 years. My wife studied, like Nestle, who spoke, this issue for 10 years. If you go to like Rohingya camps, it's like a menu of tragedy items. You want a rape victim, you want like a boy with a scar on the chest, on the bottom. I mean, like walking into like refugee camps, that's what the journalists and from New York Times to The Guardian do. And then like, UN and others do the same thing. And then fixers will fix. Yeah, whether or not these people, the interviewers that come in with their own objective and agenda, they're noble or despicable, comply with the ethical standards. I would say like majority of them will not pass the ethical test in any university context. Yeah. Secondly, if you study this issue, this is genocide, your destruction of an entire human community. If it does not make you angry, something is wrong with you. If it doesn't make you want to stop it, I think you need to stop your research because you are exploiting the sufferings of the people. Yeah, I'll tell this too. That's why my wife and I call this, industrial academic complex. Yeah, and research has become a business. Grants and names and books and articles, and then you move on to the next genocide, the next war, the next crimes against humanity. Finally, on the whether it's futile to debate a genocide or not. No, I disagree very strongly. It is not futile because I was one of the very, very people who called this genocide after 3 years of study in 5 countries between like me and my wife. The reason is this. There is something called Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide that has been incorporated into the Rome Statute as Article 6. Bosnia-Herzegovina sue, I think, Serbia and Montenegro, and at the International Court of Justice, which is not a criminal court, but an interstate dispute mechanism based also at The Hague, like ICC. The ICJ did not rule that the state of Serbia or Montenegro did not commit genocide. Srebrenica was deemed an act of genocide, But what it ruled, according to William Shabazz, one of the leading authorities on this issue, in his preface to Lemkin's book, Exit Rule in Europe, published in 1942, Shabazz wrote in 2000 plus year that Lemkin would be very pleased that ICJ has ruled that states have obligations, legal, binding obligations to use the genocide treaty to not simply punish, but to prevent the genocide. Yeah, and that is why I think that people who see this as an instrument, but not as be-all and all legal instrument, we have to mobilize every single instrument that is available within the global justice system, however flawed they are. So any state, not just Bangladesh, any state out of 150 member states of the United Nations that have signed or ratified the Genocide Convention, if we cannot find a single state, a single national community, 70 plus years after the Holocaust ended, to challenge Myanmar legally at the International Court of Justice, we are complicit fully in this because many of the states are not totalitarian, democratic states. The public must not be indifferent. That's why I think if the world, Western world, forget China, India, and Burma, and all those like Neanderthal places, so-called like liberal Europe boycotted South Africa for apartheid. Apartheid allowed communities of people to live as second-class citizens. Genocide does not. We must boycott Burma, not just the military. We must boycott Burma in all senses of the word, cultural, sports, educational, you know. Thank you.
Well, very in 30 seconds. I don't think there's anything, there's nothing called over research. Should be taught. Research is you need to continue. The word says research. So you have you need to keep on searching. So I have problems with people who say that this is the word research. This is not. But what is important, I think, the dissemination of research is limited to the English community. That has become a problem. We need to have in the Buddhist population or the Burmese population, maybe BBC can help to have in the Burmese language, and also BBC can start opening booth on the Rohingya language, because they don't know what you're talking about. None of this gets translated to the local people in Yangon on the Hito. That's important. They must know. They don't know it. If you visit, and I'm sure you know more about this. And with my little experience visiting Myanmar, I found they don't know. And not only Myanmar, even just 2 weeks back, I was in Delhi talking to the Naval Academy, and these are all naval officers, and they were saying that the Rohingyas are Bengalis. So we were stunned. We believe that there's trained people calling them Bengalis. So you can see that there is quite a deficit in the knowledge. Maybe some of us know about the Rohingyas, but I'm sure people in the streets of Myanmar, they don't know. So this is one issue I think needs to be flagged. How do we disseminate them in local languages, in local Burmese languages, and also local Rohingya language. Something number two, on the Buddhist-Muslim relationship inside Bangladesh, well, all countries now, I know, with this postmodern age, you can see that we are suffering from singularity. Tomorrow we will be launching one book, which I edited on genocide and mass violence, and the subtitle is Politics of Singularity. I think we have all entered into singularity. And Bangladesh is not an exception. It also has fallen into singularity, just as the United States under Donald Trump, India under Modi, they're all into singularity. And singularity is the issue. This is the modality that has got into our head, and we need to come out of that. So, well, compared to Myanmar, maybe the relationship is a little bit better. The Buddhists in Bangladesh have come out openly supporting the Rohingyas. We don't have that much of violence, but I still, as an academic, I would say it's not in the best of things. It could be improved. The final thing I want to talk about, we have not talked about something, and this is the Arakan Army. This is more important, not so much the arts, I can understand us. Is Arakan Army, which is going to determine the future of Arakan. I can bet on that. Somehow Myanmar government, the military thought that by throwing away all these Rohingyas, the problem of Arakan subnationalism will be resolved. Now it looks it has. The Arakan Army has. And the Arakan Army has openly said that they have no conflict with the Rohingyas. So it is quite natural that the Rohingyas will give some moral support, physical support to the Arakan in one way. But the Arakan Army also has a historical link with China. That is something that we need to worry about. China has several cards to play, that's what I'm saying. I'm being very frank on this, that they don't trust Aung San Suu Kyi. The more the international community, or more India, for example, supporting Aung San Suu Kyi, the more China gets worried. So they really don't trust her at all from the very beginning. But now, that's the only country she can visit, also Delhi. There are two countries she can visit. She can't go to other countries She tried to go to Australia, and you've seen the reaction. She can't come to Europe. She has no problem. So, so now she is, I think the international community has pushed Myanmar closer to China. So the international community needs to rethink how to go about. Out-of-box thinking is required, and I see sanction is one of the way. Shaming is the other way. One can start doing it now that we have all this Twitter, tweets and Facebook and all, and with Donald Trump using the Twitter, in a nice way. We can also think of retweeting him, and do something different. So I think there has to be some out-of-box thinking as to what can be done. And of course, keeping the gaze on Myanmar, keeping the issue of genocide alive, I think is going to blink. Finally, I have to say, and I'm saying, student of IR, as a student of IR, I'm saying, if you have a hard shell, it's easy to crack. Difficult if the shell is free. You can't crack through it, But Myanmar is supposed to be hard shell. It is easy to crack. You just need to know at what point you need to crack. I'll stop there. Thank you.
So, I'd like to thank you all very much indeed. That's a fantastically interesting, informative, and energising session. Lunch is served downstairs in the place where you may find coffee and tea at 11. And we'll reconvene up here at 2 o'clock for the next session. Thank you all very much indeed. Particularly thanks to our panelists for very, very inspiring.